Science fiction.
Science fiction.
Science fiction.
Science fiction.
The future of mankind is being guided behind closed doors.
Sci-fi inspires real-world technology.
Recently, I watched Stranger Things and it made me wonder that why don't we make such global hits like Stranger Things? I mean, just think about it. India produces approximately 1900 films per year, almost 4 times more than the USA, but generate 18 times less revenue. But what's the reason behind this huge difference, and why is it necessary to make a sci-fi specially?
What?
We all know about gene editing, right? Scientists are literally bringing extinct creatures back to life. AI is everywhere. Lab-grown meats is in supermarket. But here's what's strange. We have seen all of this in movies. These movies have actually showed what could happen in the future. Did they really predict the future, or did they just imagine ideas that later became real? People who have made this idea possible has grown up watching the sci-fi. Every engineer, founder, scientist has once in their lifetime mentioned of science fiction as their inspiration.
You know, I grew up watching Star Trek, and Star Wars was the first movie that I ever saw in a theater, and it obviously affected me a lot.
But why it should matter for all of us, right? Because researchers believe that science fiction is the great way to keep scientists and engineers engaged with this imaginary worlds, at the same time keeping writers and artists stay connected with science and technology. But if you see the pattern, before any technology appears in the real life, it is first imagined in the minds of writers and artists. Think about it. We all have grew up watching stories about romance, action, drama and thriller. Our stories has taught us how to love, fight and cry, but not how to dream about tomorrow. And science fiction actually makes you dwell into a whole new world of imagination. It makes you realize that there is something in this world that you have never experienced before. But is it that easy to turn imagination into reality? Back in 1977, when studios believed science fiction doesn't make movie, one filmmaker believed the opposite, George Lucas. Studios had shut down their special effect departments. There was no technology to make his idea possible. So he made the idea possible by bringing together young filmmakers, artists and camera experts.
Tunisian desert. Construction crews worked for 2 months to build the dwellings and towns.
They didn't just make a movie, they invented new ways of filming. What started as a sci-fi became the birthplace of modern visual effects. That movie was Star Wars. That's how everything has changed from there onwards. And isn't this the case with our industry as well? Back then, nobody believed that one filmmaker could build so revolutionary, and maybe the same thing is happening today. If a young filmmaker walks in with bold idea, it's easy for it to be ignored simply because it feels too risky. One such example is Tumbat. The story was rejected multiple times because the idea felt too strange and risky, but when it got finally released in 2018, it grew purely through word of mouth. That shows that idea was always powerful, it is just industry wasn't ready for it. And this is just one such case. There are hundreds of stories that are sitting there. It is just we aren't willing to take the risk. Now coming back to Star Wars, it wasn't just a movie, it is the turning point for entire film industry. Now we all think that science fiction can be used just for entertainment purpose, but it's not. Here's something interesting. Science fiction isn't just for movies. Some militaries actually work with sci-fi writers, not to write stories, but to imagine future threat scenarios. After the September 11 attack, US military reached out to Hollywood screenwriters simply for out-of-the-box ideas about what kind of attacks or disruptions could happen next. They believed that one such reason the attack wasn't anticipated was the lack of imagination within the intelligence agency. They might have failed to predict the future scenarios. And the USA isn't just one country. Canada and France are doing the same. But the connection runs deeper. Sci-fi isn't limited to military, it can even influence real policy decisions. In 2018, the US announced the creation of United States Space Force, a military branch focused on space. And this idea was explained in depth by two sci-fi writers, Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle. But why do governments and militaries take sci-fi so seriously today? The reason is simple. Science fiction isn't used to predict the future, but to investigate it by imagining various possible scenarios. I mean, nobody can predict the future, but we can imagine the best possible cases and get prepared for them. That's what sci-fi writers are doing for military. And science fiction writers are actually good at it because they understand both imagination and technology. But since this is the part of military strategy, very little is publicly shared, but we can see the hints of it in some science fiction book. So if science fiction is this important, what it actually takes to make a great sci-fi movies? The biggest misconception is that the good sci-fi requires huge VFX, massive budget, and an overly complex story. But that's not true. A good sci-fi starts with a question, a really good what if question. What if reality itself is a simulation, or what if AI became conscious, or what if we could bring back extinct animals? But if you look at most science fiction films in India, you will notice a pattern. Either they lean heavily on mythology or they reduce science fiction to robots. But science fiction isn't about robots or gods. It is about asking a good question. Questions we haven't answered culturally. Then you are allowed to build your own worlds, your own rules, or your own logic of reality. That's why writing is the most crucial part of science fiction films, and this is where Indian sci fi often struggles. On the top of that, there's an awkward compromise, unnecessary romance tracks, forced comedy, songs pushed into narratives where they don't even belong. Not because the filmmakers are careless, but because what the system demands. So why does this keeps happening? Because we still don't treat writers and artists as the backbone of cinema. But here's what's interesting. Science fiction can be written in two ways, either by individual writers or a group of writers. There are many powerful films like Interstellar or Kalki has begin with a single strong writers and a clear visions. But when it comes to entire universe, multiple characters and long-term storytelling, writers don't create a huge advantage. And that's where we struggle because India doesn't have a culture of writers room. On the top of that, spotlight goes to stars, the power goes to directors. The second misconception is that India doesn't possess VFX talent. When in reality, Indian artists are contributing to some of the biggest visual effects projects in the world. Science fiction can actually be used as a gold mine. There are major studios, global companies, and streaming platforms investing billions of dollars in science fiction, not just as an entertainment, but as a way to shape the imagination of next generation. We already have world-class engineers, world-class VFX talent, one of the largest film industry in the world, and an entire generation growing up in the middle of an AI and space revolution. So what are we waiting for?